I think you'd not be too happy getting this in Arena, though. Any 1 health minion that doesn't do something is pretty awful.
These are Adis, and I'll just show you guys the next one, Fiola Lightbane. These are probably the most playable cards in the TGT expansion that we've seen so far, actually. I cannot say that it is like an auto-include in like Control Warrior decks. I think it's going to be very far from that. But I think it's an option. I think under some possible metagames it will be a good option.
This card is like really insane. Almost all the cards in TGT kind of promote a slow or mid-range type of deck. And, you know, maybe the meta will slow down a little bit. I think it will slow down at least a little bit. So that will allow even more flexibility for the Control Warrior. And with even a moderate amount of flexibility, this card is like batshit OP. So even if you just draw 3 cards, that's just like pretty good. I think in almost all cases, it's good enough to use, but in some decks, it's going to be just crazy OP. You know, if you can not have to, you know, play these early minions, that kind of stuff, because the games slow down a little bit, you can run more mid-range minions, you can run more legendaries perhaps, and with enough, the average result of this would be just totally crazy. Like, you know, if you play Varian and then you get like, I don't know, like a Belcher, whatever. It's not even that big of a minion. You draw 2 spells. You know, that's just crazy, right? Because you get a Belcher, which is like 5 mana, then you get a 7/7, and you drew 2 other cards. So this is a really, really, really powerful card. If Control Warrior is like dominant again, this might be like just auto include. This might be a card you'll have to get used to playing against.
The issue with Control Warrior is that there are not really that many big minions that are good without their battle cry effects. So if you want to use Varian in the absolute best possible way in Control Warrior, you kind of have to compromise a bit on the legendaries that you use in the deck. And that is where the problem ensues a little bit. So yes, if you play Varian and you get those guys and your opponent has no answers, well, you're definitely going to win the game. But for all the games where you don't play Varian and instead of having the legendaries they'd actually want to be playing in the deck and instead you get those, well, you might actually lose more games than you'd win through Varian. So when you play Control Warrior and you're facing another Control Warrior, usually you'll get brawled, so it's pretty easy to remove a big board, and in doing so, it means that your opponent actually got a discount on removing big minions if you actually get big minions. So it kind of puts a twist on that end, and it puts a twist on the side that often in Control Warrior versus another controlling deck with a ton of removal, you are going to go to Fatigue, and drawing 3 extra cards that you otherwise may not have if you played any other legendary might cost you the game in the Fatigue battle. Really cool card. Again, this card doesn't seem that impressive right now, but I am sure it will be once we see the rest of the cards. People play just, you know, 3-mana chargers in some decks because they like to do the face damage, and maybe this guy's a little bit harder to remove. Maybe he'll replace Wolf Rider in some decks, but still I kind of have my doubts. In terms of efficiently removing stuff, it's not really the worst thing ever. It's just like not really like a wow factor. It's like whatever. This card might be alright in Arena. I say alright because as a card itself, it's alright, but you know, when you do well in Arena, you play against mages. And if you play against mages, this card goes from alright to terrible. So yeah. It's not that good, guys. It's not that good.
This card just seems pretty horrible. Like, people play cards that draw like 2 cards that don't really do too much because they usually like work with other cards or because they're playing really heavy combo decks. There's already a lot of draw mechanics out there. with Shaman, you can negate the overload with like Flame Shock, but if you can't negate the overload, screwing your next turn after you use a turn to draw is really bad. It's like, I will give up this turn, and I will give up next turn. Having 2 poor turns in a row is ridiculously bad. So this card will see, I think, very limited play. The only type of deck that might work is some kind of Malagos Shaman that works with like Ancestor's Call. Often you don't really care about screwing your turns because you're going to win instantaneously. So maybe like a 1-of in that, but I don't know. It seems pretty bad.
It doesn't seem overpowered enough to really fit into a constructed metagame.
I feel like this is a card that can replace Zombie Chow in some decks. Some decks are just ridiculously slow, and they just put in 1 Zombie Chow to kind of keep up with some of the decks. The 1-of Zombie Chow has been a really effective card in like some Paladin decks, and maybe you can get away with using this instead of Zombie Chow. It's also been very effective in ramp druid, slow druid decks, and handlock. A lot of handlocks run like 1 or even sometimes 2 Zombie Chows I've seen. So in those situations, it's a really good card because you're almost always going to win the Joust. It acts the same as Zombie Chow, but you can play it late game, where Zombie Chow you often won't want to give your opponent 5 health.
It just seems pretty underwhelming. Even so, in Arena, while like hunter weapons and maybe weapons from other classes might kind of work out, warriors generally have some of the best weapons, and you can't just use all the weapons you like in the same deck.
As a hunter, I think you're generally going to lose jousts. So I think the chance of you drawing a card is probably, I don't know, on average maybe 1 in 3, 1 in 4, but that's still all right. That's still pretty good, I guess. I don't think it'll really make constructed lists. There's just way better cards out there. It's not overpowered enough.
The card is absolutely batshit crazy for Arena. It might just be one of the best cards available to Priest, and I look forward to playing with it there.
You have like Light of the Naru, which heals for 3, but then you get the Light Warden, and the Light Warden is 2 health, and you need to kill a Light Warden or it's going to kill you. And sometimes it does just win you the game. So I feel like Light of the Naru is just really, really, really good compared to Flash Heal, and that makes it so only decks that already run Light of the Naru would even consider running Flash Heal. So it seems like it might not get too much play. It's not completely broken. It probably won't be in every Mage deck, but it'll certainly be in some, because if you're facing a controlled deck, you can go through a taunt to try to push for lethal. You can just use it as a bad polymorph if you have to against a card you can't otherwise deal with. Also, you can just use it as 4 direct damage for 3 mana, which is pretty good in lethal situations. So the reason people like Fireball over Polymorph, because they can use Fireball to kill their opponent. Even though Polymorph is better as removal, you don't have the dual purpose. This card has the dual purpose. It's Polymorph, and it's kind of like Fireball, because if you have like one, let's say 5/5 creature, you can attack your opponent face, and then you can polymorph your own creature to get a boar, and then you can attack with that again, because it's a different card, and it has charge. So yeah, really cool. Really, really cool.
I think it is a secret that might see some play in the Tempo Mage decks, which is very interesting. Perhaps we're going to see some spice, just maybe 2 Mirror Entity, 1 Effigy in some of the Tempo-oriented Mage decks. I don't think that's too far of a stretch. So if this card would see immediate play in existing decks, as well as perhaps some real play in some of the slower decks that we might see in the future. This card, that means this card is just really good. This card is really good. Not broken really good, but just pretty damn good.
Who am I?
I don't expect people will eventually run this type of deck because, well, this guy costs a lot of mana. People who play secrets, paladin secrets, are playing decks that kill your opponent quickly. This card doesn't fit with that theme, and decks in Constructed usually are themed. You want to make a deck that has one purpose. So when you have conflicting purposes, it's usually bad. So this card is probably bad.
I am sorry. Stop asking questions. Who am I? 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 None of your business.